I'll never forget that night. The rain was relentless, hammering down like it wanted to drown every sound, every thought, every shred of hope. And there I was, standing on the slick driveway, soaked to the bone, shivering, not from the cold, but from the shock and anger of what had just happened. My father, Richard, had pulled up in his black SUV, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "This is for your own good. You need to learn a lesson." Before I could speak, he threw open the door, shoved me out, and drove off into the storm. I'm Ryan, 24, a college graduate with dreams, ambitions, and a stubborn streak that had always clashed with my father's rigid expectations. Richard isn't just any man. He's wealthy, controlling, and believes in teaching life lessons with intimidation rather than words. Growing up, I learned quickly that defiance or questioning him came with consequences. But tonight, standing drenched in the middle of our suburban street, I realized he had underestimated me. Or maybe he had underestimated someone else entirely. The rain soaked through my clothes, my shoes squelched with every step, and my arms were trembling, not just from cold, but from anger. A lesson? I shouted into the storm, my voice swallowed by the roar of rain. This is abuse, not a lesson. But of course, no one answered. I felt completely alone. Or at least, that's what I thought. See, I had someone in my corner. A professional, silent, and efficient. My bodyguard, Marcus. Hired secretly months ago after a minor threat at a business event. Marcus had always been in the background, quiet, unobtrusive, but vigilant. And tonight, as I stomped through puddles, cursing my father under my breath, I noticed headlights slicing through the rain. A sleek black SUV pulled up behind me, tires splashing water in giant arcs. Marcus stepped out, umbrella in hand, his presence calm yet undeniably intimidating. "Ryan," he said, voice steady, eyes scanning the street as if measuring every possible threat. "I think someone underestimated your company tonight." I blinked, half in disbelief, half in relief. The tension that had been suffocating me for minutes suddenly loosened, replaced by the knowledge that I was no longer defenseless. My father, with all his money, influence, and ego, hadn't counted on Marcus being there. Or maybe he didn't even know about him. Marcus handed me a dry towel, his gaze sharp. "You've got two options," he said quietly. "We wait here and let him realize his mistake, or we go to him and make sure he never underestimates you again." I looked back at the dark figure of my father's SUV disappearing into the storm, a mix of fear and anger twisting inside me. Tonight, the lesson wasn't mine to learn. It was his to experience. I followed Marcus down the slick driveway, his movements precise, controlled, every step echoing authority in the storm. The rain soaked us both, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except what came next. My father thought this was a lesson for me. What he didn't know was that I wasn't alone, and for once, I had an advantage he couldn't calculate. We caught up to him just as he slowed at the corner of the street. His SUV's wipers thrashed, but he didn't slow down enough to consider the water pooling around my feet. Marcus walked up confidently, umbrella still in hand, and called out over the roar of the rain, "Richard, you left someone behind. Is that how you teach lessons?" My father froze, his expression a mix of confusion, anger, and sudden awareness that this wasn't going to be simple. "Ryan, what the hell? What is he doing here?" he shouted, gesturing at Marcus. "I'm here to make sure your lesson doesn't cross the line," Marcus said calmly, his eyes narrowing, scanning every inch of the street like he expected trouble from any direction. "You wanted to scare him? Fine. But hurting him isn't part of your lesson." I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the arrogance I'd once felt in high school victories or petty arguments with my father, but true, grounded power. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving myself. It was about reclaiming my right to exist without fear, without humiliation, without being abandoned to a storm in the name of discipline. Richard's face darkened. Pride, anger, and fear collided in a violent storm of its own. "You think showing up like this proves something?" he barked, stepping out of the SUV, rain dripping off his designer coat. "I'm your father. You will respect me. And you will respect boundaries," Marcus replied smoothly, tone icy, each word deliberate. "He's not a child, and fear isn't respect. You leaving him in the rain?" That's cruelty, not guidance. And if you don't understand that, I'll make sure you do, without ever touching him. The tension was palpable. Lightning flashed, illuminating my father's face, pale and drenched, every muscle tight. I realized then that for all his money and power, my father had made a critical miscalculation. He hadn't accounted for allies I could call upon, for strategies he couldn't see coming. I took a deep breath, the rain stinging my face, and finally spoke. Dad, I get it. You think this teaches me a lesson, but I've learned plenty already. I've learned that leaving someone to suffer doesn't teach. They just break. And I won't be broken. Marcus gave me a slight nod, a silent signal of support. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth to argue, but the fire in my eyes and the calm, lethal confidence radiating from Marcus froze him. For once, I wasn't afraid. The rain continued to pour, drenching all of us, but the storm between us had shifted. My father's arrogance had met resistance he hadn't anticipated, and I felt a strange mix of triumph and relief. I wasn't just standing in the rain anymore. I was standing in control of my own story. Richard's voice broke the silence, laced with disbelief. You've hired him? How much did this cost? He tried to sneer, but the words fell flat. Marcus didn't flinch. The cost isn't relevant, he said evenly. What matters is that Ryan has someone looking out for him. Something you failed to do, repeatedly. I felt a swell of gratitude and something else, pride. Not for Marcus, not for the confrontation, but for the fact that I had finally taken a stand. I wasn't a scared boy left to shiver in the driveway anymore. I was a man who had the courage to demand respect, who had the foresight to protect himself, and who refused to allow manipulation and control to define him. Richard's shoulders slumped slightly, the first crack in his armor. You don't understand, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. This was supposed to teach you humility, discipline. His words trailed off, drowned by the storm, and I realized something. He didn't understand that lessons taught through cruelty were meaningless. Respect can't be demanded with fear. It has to be earned. Marcus stepped closer, subtly shifting to place himself between me and my father. His calm authority was a shield, a warning, and reassurance all at once. If the lesson you wanted was to instill fear, congratulations, you succeeded. But respect? You failed. Ryan doesn't need lessons. He needs boundaries. Something you've ignored for years. I finally spoke, voice steady despite the storm. Dad, I've learned plenty tonight. I've learned that fear doesn't make me stronger. I've learned that I can stand up for myself, even when the odds feel impossible. And most importantly, I've learned that I'm not alone. Not anymore. For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker in his eyes. The proud, controlling man who had thought he could dictate my life was facing reality that his power had limits. And while I knew it wouldn't be easy to completely change our relationship, the balance had shifted. For the first time in years, I was not the powerless son. I was a man who controlled his own path. Marcus gave me a subtle nod, signaling that our presence alone had sent the message. I didn't need to shout, to fight, or to escalate. The storm around us mirrored the storm I had felt inside. But now, the rain didn't feel suffocating. It felt cleansing. The lesson my father tried to teach me had failed, but in its place, I had learned something far more valuable. Strength, resilience, and the unshakable knowledge that I could protect myself and those I cared about. As we walked back to the house, water dripping from our clothes, I felt a strange peace. The rain had soaked me to the bone, but it had also washed away fear, leaving clarity, courage, and control in its wake. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving.